Is procrastination part of ADHD? Well, yes and no. See, procrastination is the result of a bunch of executive functions starting to short circuit, making progress pretty much impossible. And you know that if it involves executive functions, there's a good chance that those of us ADHDers out there are going to struggle with it. When it comes to task initiation, we need executive functions to help us decide where to start, to break down the task into manageable pieces, to organize and prioritize the different steps, and to sustain interest. On top of all these steps that we have to overcome to just get started, there's usually this nagging fear in the back of your head telling you that you don't have enough time to make this as perfect as it needs to be, or if you don't have the time to make it perfect, is it even worth doing at all? But luckily, we don't have to just sit back and accept the fact that we are going to fly by the seat of our pants in order to complete a task or project just because we have ADHD. That's why on today's episode of the ADHD Mompreneur, we are going to discuss why it is that so many of us ADHDers struggle with procrastination and some tips to help you overcome it. But before we get into that, in case you're new to the ADHD Mompreneur, I'm Christy Lingo. I created mom-centered executive function coaching programs for ADHD mom business owners who are looking to build a successful business all while managing their busy family life. If you'd like to know more about my programs and how I could support you, make sure you visit theadhdmompreneur.com. So I mentioned in the introduction how our ADHD executive function can impact motivation and potentially cause procrastination. But that's just one part of your biology that impacts your ability to initiate a task. You also have a tug of war going on between your limbic system, which controls your behavioral response to something, and your prefrontal cortex, which controls your executive function. That pre-wired fight or flight response that all of us humans come pre-programmed with, that starts in your limbic system. And since one of the main goals of the limbic system is self-preservation, you'll often hear messages in your brain like, "Ooh, danger, let's run the other direction," or "That seems really hard. We should either find an easier way to do that or just not do it at all." When you couple the messages your limbic system is sending you, like, "You know what, we should just go ahead and wait a bit and see how things pan out," along with your already erratic dopamine levels, you are left with quite the motivational quandary. You didn't think I was going to miss an opportunity to talk about dopamine and how it relates to your ADHD brain, did you? And if you've got a day where you're already struggling with your dopamine uptake and to jumpstart your executive function, coupled with messages from your limbic system saying, "Hey man, we should just chill out a bit until the danger passes," it is no wonder that so many of us with ADHD struggle with procrastination. But it doesn't have to be that way. Let's wrap up today by discussing 10 strategies that you can incorporate into your life if you find that procrastination is holding you back as an ADHD entrepreneur or an ADHD mom. Number 1, break tasks down. One reason it can be so hard to tackle a task on your to-do list is because the task itself feels so big, and your limbic system is like, "You don't have the energy for that." But if you break this task or project down into smaller, more manageable pieces, it can be a lot easier for you to overcome that internal urge to put it off because it seems too big or like it's going to take too much time. You can create these smaller tasks by doing exercises like starting with the end result and then working backwards to see what each step it is that you need to take in order to complete this task would be. Or you could try to verbally process to somebody else all of the things that are running around in your head that are related to this task or project. Or you could try my favorite method for breaking tasks and projects down to smaller, more manageable pieces, which is mind mapping. And I've been toying around with the idea of doing a full episode about the mind mapping process. So if you would be interested in a mind mapping episode, be sure to comment down below and let me know. Number 2, diff it or do it for 5 minutes. Along with breaking the task down into smaller, more manageable pieces, you can also hack your limbic system by setting a limited amount of time that you're going to dedicate to work on this task or project. Because the limbic system by nature is going to look at a task like cleaning out your closet and say, I do not have 5 hours to tackle organizing my closet right now. Instead, you could take your lists of tiny tasks and just do one of those tasks for a small amount of time, or you could set a timer for 5 or 10 minutes and only work for that amount of time on the project as a whole. You may find that once you're in a groove and you've been doing something for 5 minutes, that it's a lot easier to stick with the task or to continue to make progress. And if your 5 minutes is up and you just don't feel like working on this anymore, you'll know that you at least made some progress, because some progress is better than none, right? Number 3, prioritize. I also think we can feel overwhelmed and start to procrastinate when we look at our to-do lists because there's just so many tasks or projects listed there. And here's the thing, our ADHD brains really aren't that great at weighting which projects are important and urgent and need to be done right now, and which projects could probably wait a little bit. Instead, we gravitate towards the tasks or projects that we feel like doing. Thank you, limbic system. And this can lead us into a cycle of procrastination. I like to share with my community my trim your to-do list method for prioritizing the tasks or projects on your to-do list. It stands for time sensitive, meaning that there is an approaching due date. Required, which means that you need to complete this step in order for you or somebody else to move on to the next step. Impact driven, which means that doing this could positively impact your life or not doing this could negatively impact your life. And finally, money related. This task could either make you money if you do it, or you could lose money if you don't do it. Prioritize what you actually need to be doing on your task list by determining if it's time sensitive, required, impact driven, or money related. And speaking of deadlines, tip 4 is set deadlines or make a timeline. If you're struggling with starting or working on a task or project because there isn't a scheduled deadline or timeline to follow, make one. An example might be something like telling a team member that you would like them to review your upcoming social media posts on Friday, meaning that you need to get all the parts and pieces to that team member before Friday and creating a deadline. Or you could use an upcoming visit from a friend or family member to motivate you to complete a task or project around your home that you've been putting off. Next, find accountability. It can be incredibly helpful for you to involve others in the process of getting things done. This could come in the form of an accountability partner like your spouse or a friend, another family member, a group, or a coach like me. Stating what you would like to do, when you would like to do it, and then asking that person to follow up with you for a progress report can be a great motivator when you are struggling to start or finish a project. You could also try body doubling either in person or online to help you stay accountable to your plan. Next, ask for help. You could also involve others by literally asking them to help you finish something. If you've already broken your project down into teeny tiny tasks, but you're still struggling to make any progress, look at your list and see if there's anything there that you would feel comfortable asking somebody else to do so that you can continue to make progress and not be a roadblock. Next, reframe the tasks. We really need to be careful of the negative messages we often send ourselves when it's related to a task or project that we're not super passionate about, but we still need to do. If we say things to ourselves like, I hate writing these weekly emails to my community, or I don't know why I waste my time making social media posts when nobody even engages with them, it is going to be really easy for your limbic system to convince you not to do these things. It may be helpful for you to reframe tasks or projects that you are less than enthusiastic about in order to reduce the friction it takes to initiate or work on them. For instance, instead of saying, I hate writing weekly emails to my community, you could reframe it by saying, sharing my weekly email tips builds my community. Or replace, it's such a waste of time for me to create social media posts when no one is interacting with them, with, even if I only reach one person with this social media post, that is 100% more people than I would reach with no social media posts. Next, create a range of positive outcomes. Another way to reframe a project is to create a range of what done looks like. Because if your limbic system is saying to you, no, we're not working on this today, you might be able to finagle a little bit of progress by working towards a version that may be less perfect than what you originally envisioned, but would still be considered done. I like to think of the range as good, better, and best. Good is the bare minimum that needs done in order to call the task or project complete. Best would be the idealized or perfect version that you have in your head. And the better version would fall somewhere in between. Aim for the good version, and if you have time and energy, work towards the better or best versions. Number 9, reward or celebrate yourself. And when you have completed your task or project, no matter how small or insignificant it feels, make sure that you take some time to celebrate or reward yourself for your progress, even for the smallest, most mundane tasks. Because your brain doesn't know the difference between if you complete a big task or a tiny task. It just knows that you completed a task, and completing a task can release dopamine. And as we talked about earlier, we need more dopamine in order to initiate more tasks and to stay motivated. Not to mention, if we've broken our task or project down into smaller, more manageable pieces, that is many more times that we have the opportunity to celebrate and release additional dopamine. And finally, speaking of dopamine, overcome your dopamine trough. Now, I could do an entire episode all about baseline dopamine and dopamine peaks and dopamine troughs, but I'm just going to try to give you a quick overview right now. Dopamine uptake can be very similar to a sugar rush. Let's say you eat a piece of cake and a bowl of ice cream and drink a Coke, which means that you're going to have a big rush of energy followed by a very dramatic drop in energy. Sometimes this drop can even take us lower than we were before we ate the cake and ice cream and drank the Coke, which means that it may take a little more energy and time for us to get back to normal or our baseline levels. And dopamine is very similar. Let's say you just got back from an amazing vacation. Chances are you were riding a pretty big dopamine high for the entire time you were on your trip because you were doing things that were fun and exciting and new. But alas, when you come back, not only are you struggling to get back into your normal flow, but it may be even harder than normal for you to motivate yourself to do things. And this can be due to your dopamine levels not only dropping back down to the baseline, but typically even below what your baseline dopamine might be. Now you've got even more ground to cover in order to get your already struggling executive function back up and running. So, how do you overcome this dopamine trough? Dr. Andrew Huberman, a Stanford neurobiologist and host of the Huberman Labs, says, "The reality is the dopamine system works according to what feels easy or hard in the moment. If you're feeling amotivated, you need to put yourself into a state that's harder than the state you're in. Put your body and mind into a state of discomfort quickly. In other words, do something uncomfortable, something you hate." Dr. Huberman's recommendation is a cold shower, but it really comes down to what you personally find uncomfortable. It could be working out, doing some sort of workout that you really hate doing. It could be eating something that is really spicy or something that is really sour. Or it could be forcing yourself to do a chore around your house that you really hate. I'm looking at you, dishes. And to really overcome that dopamine trough and get it back up and running, this needs to be something that you dislike. And it needs to be something that you dislike because the things that you enjoy will actually bring you diminished returns over time. You'll notice that it takes more of that particular thing for you to get the desired effect, and that eventually you may not get any sort of reaction at all. Okay, so that was a ton of information and options for you to use to get over procrastination and motivation hurdles. But I'm wondering if there's something that you do that I might not have mentioned. Drop me a comment below or leave me a voicemail message at the link in the show description if you would like to share how you stay motivated or overcome procrastination. And be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button so you don't miss any of the final 2 episodes I'll be putting out before I go on a short hiatus in order to spend time with my family this summer. I'll be back next week to talk about meal planning tips for us busy ADHD mom entrepreneurs. Until then, keep making your ADHD journey part of your success story. We're all rooting for you. If you're a business-owning mom with ADHD, you're going to need to grab my free, customizable essential checklists for ADHD mompreneurs by visiting bit.ly/checklists for ADHD mompreneurs or by following the link in the episode description. Do it now before you forget. Until next time,